you don't know me, I'm Skunkworks Inc. And I play retail, and I play classic. And while I do these things, I also listen to podcasts sometimes. So, anyway, let's get going.
Episode 76 of the PoddyC. We are back. I've been the scheduling has been a little bit tough on my end, so my bad if we miss an episode last week or next week or wherever it is, because I've been on vacation. Then next weekend I'm meeting up with guildies as well, so that's what's been going on there. But a lot of exciting things have been happening in World of Warcraft, including people are getting legacy mounts 5% of the time they kill old bosses instead of 0.5% of the time, thus invalidating years of accomplishments from hardcore gamers such as ourselves.
Dude, it's so dumb. I guess before even talking about that, at least I acknowledge that no one is changing their mind, right? It seems like if you're someone who's like, wait, it really sucks they're doing that, or I think it's cool, like those are minds that aren't changing, you know. But it's I think it's good. Here's my thought: if you've got Invincible 5 years ago and it meant so much to you then that you got it, and maybe you still ride it every day, right? But the moment of you chasing it and then getting it, that is what mattered, and that didn't change. That happened, right? There is the looking at it in the way of like, oh well, if I knew back in 2017 I could have waited in 8 years and gotten it for free, you know, that would. But that's not what happened, you know? So now it's about like other people getting that feeling and really wanting it and maybe have gotten really unlucky or otherwise just wanted to do it. I don't know. I saw a lot of people tweeting that they were like excited to log into WoW to get this thing that they haven't gotten in a while. So I thought for Blizzard it was smart. I don't know. I'm just a fan. I think it's cool.
Yeah, hold on, quick question. Are any of you guys collectors?
I'm a little bit of one, although I'm kind of burnt on WoW right now. Also, I've been like away.
Well, not necessarily WoW, just like a collector in general, like whatever it be, like, you know.
Yeah.
Your hype piece, like shoes,
I
or
also
whatever
used to be
it may
one
be.
in WoW as well. I collected mounts for a long time.
Yeah. I like getting the mounts and doing the little. I do some like I look at the grinds basically, and like if they're too annoying, like I haven't done Dark Fuse rep or a lot of the Undermine stuff this time around, but I'll do a lot of the kind of medium out of the way grinds that they make each expansion to, like I got Veil Strider and Tyvan and stuff, so I do a lot of that. And I think I will log in and do some mount farming. I've been away, and then also I don't know, I sort of already had a bunch of like log in the middle of the patch to do Horrific Visions, log in the middle of the patch to do Delve Belt, which I actually still need to do most of that. So I don't know, but I think this is a big dub. I think they should do this. They should do more stuff like this and less stuff like the Overcharged Delves thing and those kind of mid-patch events. I don't know if that's a hot
There's
take.
only so many of these type things they can really do, though, you know?
Yeah, they
Like,
can't
what is that
always give
Like,
people
think of
out
it like-
events like this, right?
Can you even think of something else like this that isn't just this?
It's like maybe like an alternative way to
Is
get
it all
these
mounts?
types of rewards.
It's not all. It's like a list of them and I think it's pre-Dragonflight as well, which is, you know, fair.
But isn't it all the big ones? It's Mim's head.
Yeah, it's like it is most of the big ones, yeah, if not all.
Yeah. I mean, I get it. Like, I understand the discourse around it because, I mean, personally, I don't really give a shit because I don't collect stuff in WoW. Well, I mean, I'm just not really a collector in general, but I do understand that there's this whole sentiment of wanting your reward to feel protected, you know, reserved, whatever you might want to call it. And I mean, like,
really
you know,
mad when
a lot of times,
the Shaw
yeah, I
mount was,
mean,
like,
people can be
basically
kind of
free
cringe
for a
about
day.
it for sure. I saw you linked that tweet. That was
Yeah,
pretty
oh
funny
my
to
god, this
see.
is one of my favorite tweets ever that Frog will show.
Wait, which
right
one
now.
is it?
It's in the very private don't talk about on stream channel that we're making an exception for because this one
Right now?
is harmless. Yeah, but it's the weak order that says laugh at fake unearned mounts, and it automatically laughs at filthy casual players with
that's
fraud
funny.
mounts, detecting if they earned them during July 2025. And the best part is this weak order was imported by USA Patriot.
Yeah, yeah, it was good.
Yeah, that's a good bit.
This
Because of course it was.
amazing, yeah.
This guy's name too, Garrosh God X, laughs at you.
Yeah, Garrosh God X is the character. Oh,
I guess these mounts like kind of are like a 5% drop chance is. Aren't you like basically if you want invincible, if you really want invincible, you're basically guaranteed to get it, right? If isn't this a whole month?
Yeah, I mean you are basically. I mean, if you have enough characters, you're
yeah, exactly. You would just
hard
make
guaranteed.
infinite. But what people used to do is like, I mean, I think the reason Sang had so many max level characters on an account was purely at one point for mount farm. Like you could have 60 characters. They don't need to be max level. They can be a pretty low level and still go do the invincible farm, you know? So like it's really easy to go back and do that. So I mean, right now you could come up with, you know, a bunch of 5% chances per week with 4 weeks. That's I mean, that's pretty crazy. Like invincible has always been this. I mean, I guess I'm singling that mount out. There's plenty of them, but this like really hard to get thing because a lot of people weren't playing back then, and even people who were playing back then weren't raiding in a guild where they could get it. You know?
Yeah.
Definitely rare.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the rarity of the mounts being part of the prestige is definitely the rare. As rarity goes down, right? Then for some people the prestige goes down. But I don't know. There's so many great mounts in this game. I think if people want to get them, even a 5% chance, like that's a pretty low chance. You have to do what Lich King 20 times on average to get it. Like obviously that's very doable if you have a few ults. You can do it this month for sure. But it's still, we're talking about hours of commitment to get this mount for people that want it. Like that's. I don't know. I feel like.
Thank you for the follow.
If people want a cool mount and they want to log in and do that, I have no problem as somebody who got invincible under the old drop chance to have people get it under a higher drop chance. I think with thousands of mounts in the game, it's just I'm basically never gonna have a problem with them reducing the scarcity of any of the old ones because there are so many cool ones, and I think it should just be less of a barrier if somebody thinks one is cool, or if somebody's trying to collect them all.
Okay,
either of those
what
cases
about,
should be easier.
What if it's something like a rank 1 gladiator mount? Should that also be given out, or no?
I'm fine with keeping those exclusive, although it's interesting because the PvE ones, like PvE has all the PvE ones become eventually obtainable by collectors, but the PvP ones don't.
Well, why should those be exclusive? Like, just curious.
Yeah, I guess. Well, I'm not sure. I think it's fine, I guess, to have something be exclusive and cool for people that do, something. When you think about something like PvP, right? Like that is so brutal and like awful of a thing to put yourself through that if you don't also get like a permanently cool mount behind it, I assume that no gladiators would continue to play. I assume that's like the only string holding World of Warcraft PvP still together, so I think we can make an exception there.
Well, I think there's two different levels to it, because you could also ask the inverse question of basically after, what is the rank 1 glad version of raid? Is it getting world first? It's a little less than that, right? But it's also
I think it's kind of similar
like
to Hall of Fame, which gives you a title, but not a mount.
Sure. Okay, so like imagine if like the Galliwix mount or Invincible or whatever after Hall of Fame is over, it was no longer obtainable. I think that would be kind of weird, but I mean, let's just say that's the case. That would make it the same as PvE or PvP. But also, aren't those two mounts not created the same? Like, for example, Mim's Head, Invincible, the Galliwix mount, the raid mounts are treated differently, right? Like usually PvP, even rank 1 mounts, aren't they like recolors?
There are some sick ones that they make exclusive, and then invariably they release a PvE obtainable version soon after. Like there was a sick Shadowlands one that was an incredible gladiator mount, and then they made it a very similar recolor of it, just with some less armor. Was the one for Back from the Beyond from Shadowlands that they put in like retroactively. I think there are some. It's like there's some gladiators drakes that are pretty distinctive, but a lot of the PvP mounts are,
So they're distinguishing between the two things of PvE mounts getting a drop chance nerf or buff, like so an increase in drop chance. So going from like sub 1% up to 5%, so that's literally a huge increase. And the question is should the PvP mounts be available? Well, I don't know if this is even capable of it happening. But what happens to the 20th anniversary servers when they get up into MoP, and then and achievements start happening? Like they have that. Are these accounts the same account? You know, because it is under Blizzard. So I think Blizzard has an opportunity here, possibly. If you could play Classic or some other Classic form of the game, like Classic MoP, and they keep going through, or even Classic, like vanilla era stuff, the servers that don't change. They have an opportunity to where if you achieve it on an old realm, and this is for both PvE and PvP mounts, but mostly PvP. That if you come back and do this and you achieve that feat in Gladiator or whatever, in the old content in the current meta, as if it were released and it was current. That's a really good idea. That's an opportunity for Blizzard to reward players to get everything as if, and then maybe there's an achievement with it that says the date you got it, basically. So there is light at the end of this tunnel. There is something Blizzard can do here. So I don't know how technically involved that is to do that, but on the other hand, it's an option that they have.
A lot of PvPers are stuck in recolor hell with there's some of the vicious mounts where they basically release a recolor every season for 4 seasons in a row. That's the same thing, sort of like what they did with Keystone Master mounts in last few expansions, where they didn't actually do that this time around as well. This time around, Keystone Master mounts have been getting sick and different, but yeah, there's definitely a lot of PvP mounts that are recolors of one kind or another. But yeah, I don't know. I think the Glad mount one is interesting because my gut would be to react with yeah, I guess people should eventually be able to get those as well. But then, unlike the PvE mounts, I personally don't earn those ones, so I feel a little bit less comfortable making the argument that you should be able to get them. I feel very comfortable with the stuff that I get, saying yeah, I don't care if this goes less exclusive, but I guess it seems kind of like I shouldn't be able to say that as easily about the PvP, the Glad stuff.
Yeah, it was interesting because I don't know why it's any different. I'm saying why would raid ones be able to be brought back like that? Well, it's well, I guess the rank 1 Glad is this period of time where you compete at a high level and then you get a high thing and you get rewarded for it. And I guess that just isn't what raid is though, because you can just go back and do those raids. Basically, just at one point they made the decision of if you didn't get this mount, you can go back and farm it. But
right, and so we should be able to have something to distinguish whether if they compiled the systems basically. And if you went back and did it in classic version, but you actually did the actual content that was out 20 years ago, it should state something with that mount. There should be a little tag to it, oh hey, not only did you achieve it on this, but you did it in the classic version of the game, as if it were retail. And I think people having that distinguish between it would be a thing. Do I think a lot of people actually care? I mean, you're riding around on a trophy that you lucked into, so I really don't know. It's a personal thing. I personally, I think it means more, but I don't necessarily know if it matters. I think people treat it as a something they didn't earn as well, you know what I mean? But then again, some people ran it twice and it dropped, so did they really earn it? So, or the people that have been farming this mount for 10 years, did they really earn it? I don't know.
You could apply that same logic to rank 1 PvP mounts, except how do you go back to an old season to PvP? It would be the equivalent would be like there's a vendor, and after a certain amount of arena matches, you can like pity buy a.
They have that with vicious saddles for like vicious mounts, but not for the rank 1. Yeah, the rank 1 mounts each season. Those ones are kept exclusive.
Yeah, the vicious mounts are pissed.
It's just the same as it's the same as the Famed Slayer title, except it's a mount instead of a title, I guess.
Well, I mean, I guess the answer is there isn't a PvE equivalent of a rank 1 glide mount. There isn't a mount you get for killing a raid world first or in Hall of Fame. There's one you get for cutting edge, which the bar is significantly lower than rank 1 glad's equivalent, right? It's like there isn't a comparison.
Well, would that be cool though? Because I mean, like, I do feel like there should be something for, you know, say getting top ranked in M+, or
it probably doesn't exist for the same reason there aren't Realm First titles anymore, where enough people were mad that weren't included that it outweighed how cool it was for the small amount of people that actually got it.
It's locked.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of
So their argument is it's a feel bad moment for players. That's fair.
Aspirational rewards. But yeah, there is a big trade-off where like the cooler you make the reward and the smaller set of people you award it to, the more people are feeling bad about it instead of feeling good about it. Obviously some people like get pushed by that, right? Like the existence of an M+ title at 0.1%, for instance, if that didn't exist, there would be a lot less people pushing high M+, right? That would be that is a big motivator for a lot of people, and I think definitely like if you change that title to a cool mount, that would become even more true, right? But then also the people who get barely missed it are gonna feel awful if it's something cooler than a title. So I don't know. I think if I was Blizzard and I got the budget for another cool mount, I think I'd probably just put one of like 500, something like that, rather than.
I would put in the cash shop personally.
What did you? Sorry?
He said he put in the cash shop.
Oh, the cash shop. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
good comms. I would bundle it with some traders tenders as well, and throw that thing in the cash shop right away.
Yeah.
I'd make it a 12-month sub mount. That's actually what I'd do with it.
Oh yeah, they got me with that one. I bought the fucking cat, with the little hoodie for it.
Yeah,
it cost like a year sub just to get that.
There's tech for that. I think if you buy the 12-month sub once, which you can buy with BNet balance, which you can buy with tokens, then anytime you extend it, you can extend it with tokens, and you keep the status of being a 12-monther.
Wait, what the hell? That's a hack.
Mask forever. Yeah, that's tech. I believe that works. I don't know. I buy 12 months with my BNet balance every 12 months, so that's what I do. Okay, I guess sad news that immediately struck me as sad, but I can definitely understand why they did it. Breath of Syndragosa, the Empower ability that we spent like 10 minutes trying to figure out and like debating whether it would be.
So before we move on, so like we're basically, do you want people to feel bad because they feel like they're locked out of M+ titles, all titles basically, competitive and non-competitive? You know, or do we want people to? What is the balance between having people feel that it's unachievable and the people that feel that it's how many people is it too much to have it to be common, basically? Like, and you know, we have to answer that as a community, you know, and obviously these people that are getting mounts that have been running it for 10 years, they're probably just like, oh, please just give it to me, you know, kind of thing. But at the same time, is that what we want out of community? Obviously, they're allowing this short period of time for that to happen. So that's the question we have to ask ourselves.
Good and how to use it. They have basically reverted that. They made Breath sort of
So we're going back to Breath of Syndragosa, which is a DPS DK ability. Basically, that is a dynamic ability that you can hold it for 1, 2, or 3 seconds, and it does something else. So it changes like the duration and the cooldown of which the ability has, and how much damage it does.
Interesting, where it's the like you don't extend it with spending RP anymore. You extend it by just casting abilities, right?
Yeah, no, they
Like,
have
by
you.
playing the
It's,
game.
it's from spending Killing Machine procs on a blip
Yeah.
or Howling Blast with Rhyme, which, by the way, are the exact buttons you'd want to press in your pillar, which is when you're going to use this anyway.
Right.
So basically, it's zero thinking. You press it for runic
Mhm.
power cost, and it's just going to do damage over a duration, and you're going to press.
Right. And what they're talking about is PTR stuff at this point. So these are going to be incoming changes to the Death Knight tree, which should be fine. So
buttons that you would have pressed anyway. So they basically just turned. Why it makes I agree with you. Why it makes me sad too is it just takes at least the single coolest part of why I love playing Frosty K just out of the game forever. I understand it was really polarizing. A lot of people didn't like it, but speaking for me, which I feel comfortable doing, I absolutely loved it, and it was very sad reading that it was basically a non-interactive button in terms of that. So. Super sad. I mean,
So-
good shit to play. I think I haven't played this before.
So all the hype, if you like interactive gameplay, if you really enjoy the diversity of your spells and how to cast them and when to cast them, what they've done is they've taken that element out of it completely. So you're going to cast breath at the same time you're normally doing in the spells that complement that or extend the cooldown or debuff on something that's going to be already in your normal rotation, which is a quality of life thing. So
Version, and I haven't played the version that they on the PTR that they were originally changing it to, which was like the breath. Like maybe the Empower actually did feel like shit to play. The vibe that I got from a couple people was it was more like there was just still a lot of negative feedback that it was draining runic power at all, and like basically that side won, which is sad because
Yeah, I mean,
it's
the
fun,
thing is, they just took it out. I don't.
right, they took out the resource part of it, the resource management part of it, which this game is a lot of resource management. Mana is at its source a resource to manage. Your health is a resource to manage. Like, so all these runic powers and rage is a resource that you have to manage. So we have all these things. So they basically they didn't dumb the ability down. They dumbed down. They made it quality of life and simplified it to where it was easier. It was easier and maybe a more fun gameplay experience because you don't necessarily have to think so much. Basically,
I don't really understand the whole discourse about Vim Power because like Vim Power didn't really. I mean, what the people complained about were not exactly about Vim Powers. It's more about like it's still Breath of Sindragosa, and people just didn't want Breath.
yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's gone. It's just gone now.
Yeah, that is some of my most fun times ever playing WoW have been playing Frosty K, and if Breath was the reason, like if Breath did not exist, like I just you could make the argument that this game can exist with really really easy specs, like a few are, and also there's really high mastery specs, which there are, but is there room for a Surrender to Madness type thing to exist? And obviously with Surrender to Madness they removed it, but Breath of Sindragosa is like probably the closest thing that they've had to that, where basically for, you know, especially when it was permanent, like you basically could keep it up forever, but only if you played really well. There was not really anything else in the game that was punishing like that, but also the upside was that high. It's really sad, honestly, but I also get it because I've seen it in my stream how much, if you're not on the same line of thinking that I'm on right now, how much you hate Breath is equally mirrored with how much I love it.
Yeah.
So I get it.
It's funny because like, despite all of this, we're sad about it being gone. There are actually a lot of people who are very positive about this change. I've heard largely positive feedbacks about like how Frosty K is actually really fun to play now, etc. Although I will say, so I did play Frosty K on PTR, and I have been playing Frosty K this expansion, so I have a good idea of what it's like. And the class actually itself plays really well outside of breath now. I mean, breath is like there's not a cooldown anymore, so you can
Right,
just
it doesn't change
lights
how
up.
your
But
effect
yeah,
does anymore, right? Well, it's
Yeah,
not
that was
like,
the whole
just
focus of the rework.
the class itself actually plays really well now. You don't just spend on AoE cross striking. Cross striking is like super fucking lame. You actually have an AoE spender for both your runes and running power, like you guys can cross life and
that was always something
they shut
that
things down.
was weird about Frost DK was like all your AoE damage came from like killing
It just
machine
happened
fleet stuff
passively,
and
yeah.
rhyme empowered howling, but like yeah, not having an AoE spender was one of the differences that I think is probably good to change. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and not having to stand in your D&D anymore. D&D is just completely
yeah.
gone from the game. pretty
Standing
much.
in your blank is a mechanic that if that was removed every
I think it's
instance of
okay
it,
in
I'd
some
be happy.
situations. Yeah, like I'm not like saying we should completely remove standing ground shit, but at the very least, it should not be for Frost DK because it felt really bad having D&D tied to your
DPS
ability.
classes specifically, when you're not a tank and you don't have control, because a lot of the stand in your own shit is tank related, right? It's like Paladin, stand in your Consecrated, Blood
Paladin,
DK,
yeah,
stand in your D&D.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So like, but anytime you've had that with like hunters, with like wild spirits or elemental shamans, right, with their damage on the ground, anytime that it's so frustrating to have you not be in control of the damage you're doing.
Old Firestorm, where it lasted like a minute, not a minute, but it lasted like 15 seconds or something, and you just had to hope that people keep stuff in it.
But yeah, they also, with this new talent you play, Remorseless Winter's like basically gone to. I don't know, it's such a different class. Like Empower Rune Weapon's a completely different ability too. It's literally a completely different spec now, but it actually plays quite well. Like your resources aren't completely screwed like it was before, where you just largely ignore your runic power. So
Yeah,
I think they've done a pretty good job.
The changes outside of breath all looked really good. I still think the breath thing is really sad though.
Question:
Yeah.
Could they still do like? Was the Empower thing badly received, or because could they still do that with this version of breath and have that be the part that's like wording skill? Yeah.
I didn't try it personally, so I don't know. But I know coming from people in my stream, I couldn't really get a conclusive answer. I mean, I don't know how many people go on PTR to test specs outside of people who it's like their job to do that. But yeah, I would like to know. You are right. I was about how people's reaction was really positive to the change. I was so baited because I came on after like a day, or I think these changes got posted, but I didn't see them, and I went live, and they were like, "Dude, you're gonna love the breath change." And I'm like, "This is the week after the Empower change." So I'm like, "Oh man, we're still cooking. This is gonna be amazing." My whole chat's pogging, and then I read it, and as I realized it, I just got progressively more and more sad, and I was like, "This is not. Are you guys baiting me?" And it's like, no, it's just, it's just no one.
That's how some people like it.
It's just how some people feel about it. They're just breath is just the enemy for them.
Yeah, that's fair. I actually am kind of sadder about the Empower thing going away because I thought that was a really cool cook. So, but I know Empower can be awkward to play, so I could see that being maybe.
They're still talking about quality of life and feel. So that's really what they're coming down to is feel of a class. Does it feel clunky? Do you actually have a rotation? Because last, I'll just put it this way, during Nuremberg Palace, Frost DK was seriously hit one button. It was to the point where it was advantageous for Frost DK to obliterate and not cast another spell, basically. It was just better for them to just sit there and hit obliterate like 3 or 4 times during certain procs, which is uneventful gameplay. And they were very good at the time too. So
Something that they actually just shouldn't use a lot of because it is maybe it's cool conceptually, but it's like super clunky to play. I know Empower spells can
I wish
be
I
like
would have
that.
tried it because I could actually.
Yeah, I wish I tried it.
It
as
doesn't
well.
sound annoying to do. Like before you're going into breath anyway, that's like a big moment. You could, if you're empowering it once, which is where you want to go fast, it's gonna be instant. We're almost instant, and it's like if you're doing the long one, maybe the 30-second one just felt like you were waiting. I could maybe see that, but yeah, unfortunate. Well, one of the actual cool Empower idea, you know, and if maybe if you have really cool Empower ideas and it's still not fun to use Empower, maybe Empower sucks. That's
Maybe,
another way to
yeah.
look at it.
So I mean, I had this discussion on my stream too.
That's a fair take about it. But at the same time, you're used to classes playing a certain way, okay? And when those don't play that way, you like, you know, I know Dratnos likes Templar Paladin, you know, as a tank. So, you know, it's one of those things where, do I want this? It's one of those things where, you know, I disagree. I'm not a big Templar fan. I don't like how it plays. I think it's clunky as well. I think as you progress through and get more and more gear, it becomes more powerful. But that's true about everything. So that's not. So, you know, it does get better. But I personally feel that I personally don't enjoy it. I would rather play Lightsmith. So. Yeah, I don't think that's necessarily a good upgrade.
And I was saying, like, what is there to like about this version of Breath? It's a non-interactive. It's just a DPS button you press. Like, what do people exactly like about this? And I never really got a conclusive answer to it.
The answer.
No, because the answer is quite simple. It's easy to play and it tops the charts. You know, that's why people play meta. But that's exactly why Unholy DK, not Unholy DK and DPS DK in general, that's why everybody that plays DK was not very happy this past patch. And they weren't very happy because they didn't get the utility that they this is why they complain about the high variance raid buffs that they have is, well, if their utility's not good, it doesn't matter what their DPS is. At least on this patch it was. So maybe next patch their high DPS will be needed. But you know, as of right now, that's not how it is. So I need to see what is here. Oh, okay. That's a damage. Yeah, it's a damage curse. That's a one you gotta take off. So
Is that, at least from what I can tell, why people like it is because it's not draining runic power anymore. It's just it's
Yeah, but I mean,
it's
like,
addition by subtraction to them.
Surely it could be like any other cooldown, right? Or just completely remove it from the game entirely. Because like, what does this provide to the class?
Yeah.
Is what I'm like trying.
it makes it easier to play, and we're at the end of the expansion. We're at the third raid of the expansion, and like, what are we? Like, this is the time where you're allowed to be, you know, you're supposed to get better. You play think of this as kind of like a learning curve. Like, think of WoW as a learning curve, and think of it as every expansion is a class, like an actual in-game class where you go and you play. Yeah, you go and you play and you get better, okay? And think of the first raid of an expansion. Think of that as kind of like you're going into this class and you're kind of nervous because you don't know really what is going on, okay? You don't know what the subject matter is going to be. You know what the title of the class is, but what does that mean? Okay, you haven't really looked into the book. You haven't researched much. You know, but think of it coming in as a newer player, like players that have something possibly to prove, but also possibly to possibly to prove, but something to learn, something new, so everybody's like excited, things like that. So the way I see Blizzard like bringing this stuff out and engineering this stuff is, at the very first of expansions, things are really, really hard. And it's not just a seasonal, like the drop off in the nerfs and things like that are not just seasonal. I believe there's also a gradual nerf to the content and power level to the content as we go through the entire expansion as well. Now that can go up and go down, but it can also flux. When that high peak is determined on the devs and the engineers, the gaming engineers. So basically, I think going into very last expansion, I expect for there to be just kill mechanics to where like Farrak in Amandrasil, like to where if you don't do X thing in X amount of time, you wipe. Like in the last when we see last raid for the expansion, like this is what we're expecting. We're expecting these high, very, very high, absolute, just wipe if you don't do it kind of spells. So that, and I expect that going into this now. And what you see, if you go back and you think about, like, look at what Nuruba Palace, which was the first raid of this expansion. Okay, like think about what it gave us, and think about what gameplay it does. Everything was the damage profile. There wasn't a whole lot of bursty damage. Okay, in Nuruba Palace, it was very laid out. The damage was very widespread and overwhelming over time. Okay, if you look at all those raid fights and things like that, and then you get into Undermine, and we kind of change a little bit, and things are a little bit more bursty. We have One Armed Bandit that's doing just raid-wide damage, a lot of burst, a lot of spot healing. So things like this, and I expect the burst to go up and high, and on this last expansion, and that's by design, I believe. So I think if more people kind of looked at it like that, they would see some trends in the game and how it's kind of like there's an overall trend of difficulty of damage dealt versus healing that has to come out too. And I think that changes over the course of the expansion, not just within the season. So
I'm gonna argue because I don't understand what people could possibly like about this, aside from, like, I guess your character just looks cool while it's like shooting out frost.
Yeah, it's got a cool animation, so they should keep it. Okay, other DK changes. So a lot of people, us included, highlighted that like DPS DK was just a worse version of Blood DK when their raid buff is their grips, right? So they have reduced the CD of DPS DK grip now, and I'm not sure. Does this mean that now DPS DK and Blood DK have the same grip power, except for mass grip still being? Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, that. Okay, so there's multiple levels of this that are interesting, because I don't know if it was us or like something I said on my stream, but I was just like, the thing that makes the most sense is just to make DKs be able to grip, and like I think all of us can agree the reason that DPS DK has not had the same as Blood DK so far is because of PvP. Like, if Blood DKs have 50-second grip PvP, that can't be the thing. And then so I was like, why can't they just do this but not have it be for PvP? There's really not anything in the game that lets them do that. In PvP, you can change things with PvP talents, but there are not PvE talents. There are only talents that are shared between the two. There's no way to make something specific like that. So I wondered if they could just do it anyway. Be like, you know what, we're making a change, but just in PvP it ain't happening,
Yeah.
right? And then they actually did that. Like the actual line of text says, you know, only does not work in PvP to literally after that. I don't know if I've ever seen that before. And it made me go back to think about how Shadow Priests still have silence and dispersion.
Let's face it, PvP and PvE are they're separate games within the same game. They just are. So this needs to be, like, from a balancing point of view, this just makes a whole lot of sense.
That's the I can't cast that yet.
And so
That's still recharging.
So it makes a whole lot of sense to, you know, to start doing this. It makes a whole lot of sense in balancing, you know, raid fights and everything. I mean, we're going to get a third spec here with Demon Hunter here. Who knows if it's going to be ranged or another melee spec, but hopefully it balances that class out, you know, because it needs it. So because they constantly nerf it, huge nerfs, you know, and huge changes because they can't settle on and balance the AoE versus the cleave of the class.
In their spec tree, because when they came out with the talent trees, they weren't going to allow RNP, a already dominant PvP comp, for the priest healer to gain dispersion and or silence in the class tree, like literally every other class in the game. So I wonder if they can do something for priest as well, where they can do something like that, because I feel like those classes aren't being treated the same or are suffering similar issues. I think this is the biggest thing they need to change. I know a lot of people, and maybe still, and I would say validly, are like, that doesn't matter. We still need an actual raid buff, and I'm with you, right? This was more important to fix than that, though, in my opinion. Let's say they did before this change. Let's say Death Knights got a 2% haste buff for the whole raid. Cool. You're still bringing Blood Decay every single time. So that doesn't solve the issue. This needed to happen to solve the issue, and I do believe it will. Go ahead.
How much do you think Mass Grip is like something that would matter for the DPS?
So is what they're saying here is that the raid buff actually affects PvP so much that they're refusing to do it for PvP reasons? If that's the case, if that's truly the case, and we can balance, if we can balance the raid based off of it, you know, but we can't do the PvP, then why wouldn't you do this? Like, that just makes sense. And I know all the people that play PvP are going to immediately cry and wonder and they should because they feel like they're getting, you know, like, why don't we get this cool stuff? Why don't we do this? Because it breaks the game. And, you know, that's essentially what happens in PvP. You know, you're breaking the game. So I wonder if they mean that. If they do mean that, then if they do mean that, then there should be, like, we should look into that possibly. You know, because I don't think anyone cares. Like, does anyone... It goes back to the thing that should raid buffs just be there, you know? Should the stat stick just be there no matter what, the raid comp, you know? And yes and no, you know? There's an argument for it and against it, so...
Versus Blood Decay comparison. Because I feel like Mass Grip it's strong, but I think it's maybe a little bit over. Like, I think the short range on it is pretty killer for how many fights it actually gets, like, that much value on. And any of those fights, it's pretty much fine to use Sigil of Chains as well, although using either a DK or a DH tank is still a pretty big restriction.
Yes. So I thought about this a lot, and actually talked about this earlier today. But I think it depends on their design, right? If you look historically, Mass Grip has value, and it's really hard to look historically when A-Bombs Limb existed, because that was Mass Grip. Like, in almost every scenario, A-Bombs Limb was crazy convenient. You would have used Mass Grip instead. But they've clearly stated, hey guys, this is going to make sense, because we're going to design fights that make single grip really valuable. Now, in the short term, It's really easy for them to do that. There's a couple of really good single grips on hard bosses this tier. One we haven't seen yet on testing, which is why I know a lot of people haven't, like, they're like, there is none. But it's not on every boss, and I'll get into a Warlock kind of equivalent to that later. But they are, there's no scenario this tier where Mass Grip would be good right now, right? So in the short term, don't think Mass Grip really matters, at least on any relevant fight, or would really make a difference. Now, maybe even next tier, that's still on fresh on their minds. I think what's everyone's concerned about is that going to be the case like 2 years from now? It's not future-proofed, you know? It's eventually something's going to fall through the wayside, and that's not going to make that work where they could just simply not... You can just give them a raid buff and they're in all the time, and it's...
Yeah. Like, is it good to be a DK in a world where there's maybe 1 or 2 fights a tier that Grip is good on? Kind of still no, because if your spec sucks outside of that, you're just gonna only get played on those fights, right? And like, that's kind of stinky.
Yeah, it's stinky.
And then also, is it good to be a guild without a DK? Oh man, like that would suck if they just make fights every... So I feel like this kind of... Like, obviously, it's, you know, you want to have access to everything if you're a guild, but if they make Grip super good on a fight, that could be very different than, like, missing a few percent from a raid buff, right? If you're missing a vital grip on a fight, so... Yeah, I don't
Also,
know.
still didn't solve the issue of it being complete.
Yeah, but grip is exponentially better. And it's high variance. That's why it has such a long cooldown. And, you know, it changes the fight because it changes positioning. Nothing like, yeah, static buffs are cool, but it doesn't change your positioning, which is so important in WoW, you know? So the same, you know, if we all want to be a stat stick, that's fine, you know, I get it, but at the, you know, we still have to choose kind of what we want, you know?
Useless in M+.
Yeah,
Yeah,
There still
Mythic
doesn't
Plus
have
is
a purpose.
Mythic Plus got cooked in all of this. Their A-Bombs Limb was great in Mythic Plus, especially for Blood Decays. And then Single Grip, obviously good at Mythic Plus, but their AMZ is now worse than it was in Mythic Plus, right? So like Mythic Plus, like DK in general, which raid buffs do matter, Mythic Plus has just gotten worse. And that's another angle of this that I don't even know if they've talked about, or maybe they could be out.
Yeah, and maybe we just deactivate raid buffs in Mythic Plus because Mythic Plus is supposed to be this very uniform, like they're trying to uniform things down. So if Mythic Plus is this fair, competitive, uniform kind of place, like it makes sense to make those changes that when you go into N+, you know. It does. Does it take away from playing the individual classes? Yes. But what do you... At some point, you have to kind of toss that away a little bit and make a choice, you know?
Ask that in interviews or something. Because there's ways to fix it, right? Like, think about it like this. Like, Tranquility does double the healing in, like, a 5-man scenario, right? Like, why can't current AMZ... Since they like nerfed it, and could they make AMZ more potent in a Mythic Plus scenario, right? Since they nerfed the cooldown of it because of raid, I don't know. There's something you could do there.
Yeah, I mean, like even for Blood Decay, it feels terrible. Like we're talking about just DPS DK for the most part, but for Blood Decay and N+, I mean that class has gone the short end of the stick since the beginning of Dragonflight. Yeah, and. I was actually gonna make a video talking about all these issues with tanks right now, but man, like Blood DK, it has been in such a bad state for M+. It's actually so sad. In fact, it's so bad that they got nerfed coming into this patch. I don't know like how much people are aware of that, but the class straight up just functions worse with how they changed Sand Lane and was the one Deathbringer? Yeah, Deathbringer, and the nerf to AMZ, the nerf to A-Bomb Limb. I mean, the class just straight up like, why are we even playing Blood DK when literally any other tank just performs way better?
Yeah.
Yeah, Blood DK and M+ has always been like it feels very good in weekly keys and stuff to have a Blood DK. But then as soon as you start trying to push at all higher than that, it can be a really frustrating tank to push on once the auto attacks get really dangerous. And there's just really like A-bomb limb was a huge good reason to put up with that, and that's just now gone. So
Also, how hard is it to create tanks that feel different mitigation-wise, just in the history of WoW, and you make them work in both modes? Like, for example, Blood DK is like the most fun like raid tank of all time, right? Just because the way raids are made, and it's a Mythic Plus where that like super high scaling melee attack thing becomes an issue, versus like them. How do you fix that without making them worse in raid? Like, how important do you find how they play in raid versus Mythic Plus is tank specific?
Same thing with Brewmaster, you know? Like, when you can dodge, you know, when parry and dodge are great, you know? So that's why they're really survivable in, or blood decays in solo single target fights, raid fights, because, you know, they're parrying and dodging a lot more than the other tanks. They're not straight mitigation, but that's where shields in mitigation have to be stronger when you get to N+, because the overall mitigation off these, you can't dodge with internal diminishing returns. It's just if you don't put the diminishing returns in there, statistically the DK will win every time, which is what they're arguing. So to find some kind of balance there is nice. But you know, that's what they're really coming down to on this.
I've always found that interesting. I have a question for you too about like raid buffs and raid. So what are the other specs? What are the other classes that now are with the DK where they have a raid buff, but they don't have a hour-long raid buff that puts them in the raid, but they are brought to raid either really frequently or somewhat frequently, and they do not have one like that, right? The only one I can think,
and Warlock.
It's Evoker and Warlock, right? Where some people who are listening to this might be like, well, Evoker does have a 60-minute raid buff. It does, but that is not the reason you would ever bring it to a raid. It's just kind of like a flavor thing, or it's just simply not.
Hello, chat, by the way.
Not good enough power-wise to put them in the raid every time. Okay, well, how many bosses in a raid do you bring a Warlock, right, because they have that buff? It's like probably every single one, and why? And is it Gateway? I would actually say Gateway is about as useful as Death Grip, honestly.
I agree. But it's high variance, and you can reposition the entire raid. So that's what we're getting at here.
Usually for about as many fights in a tier you feel like you really need Death Grip, there are about as many fights where you feel like you really need Gateway. Sometimes you use Gateway, but you don't need it. It's just like, okay, this is kind of nice. But need Gateway and need Grip, very similar. But Warlocks also have Hellstones, which are the best thing that they bring. It is something you absolutely need in progression. It's super OP. And then what a lot of people would say is their ability to like have wipe recovery or to summon people. And if you don't have a Warlock, you just kind of waste time during the night, even though it doesn't really, those two things don't increase your singular chance of killing a boss on any pull like Hellstones would, like an actual.
I would argue those are actually the two most important things for Warlock. And in fact, I would say it's so important that almost every raid, even Pug Heroic, Pug Normal, would rather have a Warlock in their group than, say, a Havoc Demon Hunter or a Demon Hunter in general for Chaos Brand. Yeah, because it's nice to have 3% more magical damage, but you know what's nicer than that? Being able to summon your raid, being able to wipe recovery, and I mean, like Hellstones are nice too, but those two specifically are so big for Pug in particular.
Like heroic having a Warlock is like the most important thing by a lot.
Yeah, and I think the way you differentiate those two things, I look at it as like things that are convenient to have for your food that save you time versus things that are like increasing your chance of killing a boss, something that helps you in combat and a raid buff, right? For example, like a haste buff for a class couldn't compete with Warlock's wipe ability, but like, or Warlock's wipe recovery, but they are competing with their gateways and their Hellstones, for example, like stuff that'll help you in a fight. And then you have Evokers, who... Now, and let's be clear, Warlocks, I think, have been brought to every world first kill in... Like, there were times we were thinking about sitting it, or I think we sat it on Kurog, maybe. I think Kurog world first, you sat Warlock after a bunch of progression. So one boss in, like, forever. Evokers were sat last tier on a fight. So, like, Evokers are making up their value with some combination of rescues and Zephyrs and time spirals and spatial paradox, and if you're an Aug Evoker, a bunch of other things. But like that's how you're making your things that are stackable and really good. Now, all of those things from both of those specs are more useful. Death Grip is only usable in a specific fight when they make it work for that, and those things are applicable all the time, and in those cases you still sit Evokers, right? So I just don't really understand why they're so hesitant. Like, what's the worst that could happen? Like, what is the punish? What is the punish for DK getting a little haste buff? Who's in pain? Who suffers? No one, right? No one suffers. Maybe like raid.
That's the issue. No one. There is no. It might be haste buff in general. Yeah.
Balance becomes a little weird because certain classes scale with haste, some weird shit like that. Like, I don't know, but like no one suffers. What are we doing here? You've already solved this problem. You had this problem with enhance. You kind of addressed the enhancey part of the problem with Death Grip today, even though not fully because Mass Grip still exists, and from another class, Mass Grip still exists. I don't know, man. I don't understand. I don't get it.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's one of those things where, like, I think there's just a stubbornness about it at this point, and that's just the main thing that's going on.
That's true. I mean, that is kind of Blizzard's whole bid, right? It's like, behold, in our situation, they're just kind of stubborn about, like, this is just how it. I mean, the raid lockout, dude.
If you're gonna give them, okay, you have this utility that makes you needed on raid fights. Okay, well, like, then give them 3 times more of that shit, so they're competitive with Warlocks and Evokers, the only other classes do not really have a raid. Like, and that sounds like a harder thing to solve than just giving them a fucking raid buff, you know? So, like, what are we doing?
Yeah. Yeah, like Evoker, it's one of those things where Evoker is definitely in that space too, where it's tough for the fact that they've almost always been good. We've been complaining about this for Evoker too, right? It's just, it hasn't actually mattered because they have been good. The utility suite they have has been enough for them to get like 90% of fights. It's just worth having one, and so you can just kind of shorthand that to them having a raid buff. Same with Warlock, but yeah,
Well, they've been so OP.
Yeah, that's true. There's always been an OP.
There's always been an OP
spec.
Evoker. Like, imagine a scenario where, like, none of the Evoker specs are really that great. You could see an entire tier where you don't bring a single one, and then you'd run into the same problem.
And we would start to play. That's the thing. Like, I think it's bad design with Evoker, but they're getting away with it, so it's not a big deal. But they're not getting away with it with DK, and I feel like they're just like trying to reinvent the wheel here instead of doing the fix that 100% would guarantee that you would play a DK, and that would be good. Like, because we're doing that with every other class in the game. Like, why is that not? Why can't DK get that?
I mean, Hunters kind of have something similar too, right? Where Hunters were given a raid buff that has absolutely 0 value in Mythic Plus, right? It's like there's still some issues with some of the really like more clever raid.
Well, actually, I mean, even in the raid, how good realistically is the Hunter buff?
Unsittable.
Yeah, unless the fight is like you could sit them on Mugsy, for instance, progression if the raid buff isn't providing you value on that fight necessarily once you're making the push. So there are some fights where you could consider where the raid buff is maybe not getting all that much gas. I think Bandit is another, like, both those fights, right?
We went back and looked at all of the bosses that usually have damage due at the beginning, not count towards the end. In almost every scenario that's ever happened, you still wanted to get out of that first phase early. Like Razagath, for example, is exactly like that.
At least during early progression. Although, like Sire, you know, by the time you're killing Sire, you're stopping damage.
Yeah, Sire's like basically the only boss I can think of that would have had that not matter. But I think the Hunter buff is actually closer than a lot of them in terms of what they actually want. Like, in my opinion, and what I think Blizzard thinks, is raid buffs should be as good as they need to be to guarantee each class one spot in a raid group. That's the angle they've gone. And it should be no better than that, right? Where you run into the issue where they're a lot better than that, then they start impacting Mythic Plus in a big way. And now that can determine a Mythic Plus comp. Like, for example, Mythic Plus comp was so specific at one point they nerfed Arcane Intellect and Chaos Brand, right? Which made them, what, still really good, neat, 100% necessary in raid. But those individual tools mattered a lot less in picking 5 specs to be in a Mythic Plus group, but they were still good, right? So if they ever nerf a raid buff and it's putting you more in line with every other class that you're competing for a spot with, but they still guarantee you a raid spot, isn't that a good thing?
Yeah.
Right? Wouldn't you want that to happen to every spec, so it's less about the raid buff and more about what your class is doing, right? So, who knows?
Dude, it's actually still so crazy to me.
Yeah, but is that the ultimate want out of this game? That all of your that if everything cool came out of your talent tree instead of like through a raid buff scenario kind of thing. I mean, they could, like, I mean, raid buffs are nothing more than a temporary stat stick, basically. You bring this, you get stat stick. So you could still do that. You would have to, like, min-max a lot of the numbers. I think the raid buffs are just easy to have them. It just makes it easier to balance the game. That's why they exist. Like, and then it because they're easier to balance the game with, then yeah. But also, I think a 2% haste raid buff is detrimental. You know, it's detrimental, but it's also, like, from a map point of view, if you give DKs with this, if you give them a 2% haste buff, every class haste just gets worse. So think about it. Think about your class being 2% haste down all the time, because that's end up what's going to happen to the classes. They're just going to make gear and the scaling much different. They're just going to change the data curve, basically, in the stat weights and things like that on the statistic end.
To think that Chaos Brand and Arcane Select were 5%.
Yeah.
Like, what, a year ago? Maybe like a year and a half ago? That is actually insane. I mean, because, like, right now, it being 3% is still pretty insane, but it being 5% back then was absolutely absurd.
Yeah, that was a completely unrealistic number for the length of the game that it was. Yeah. Okay, other PTR news. Do we want to talk about bubbles getting removed
dude.
from Floodgate? I actually think this was a huge dub. Taking a mob that was just, like, not playable and then taking it out of the dungeon, like, that was really good.
In such a thematic way, too.
Yeah, exactly. Like, they gave it a cool cutscene of getting killed.
Dude,
by
that
Swamp
cutscene
Face.
is fucking awful. Have you guys seen that? And that is like the most brutal thing I've seen Blizzard do
It's
in
so
a very
funny.
long time.
Yeah, and then there's Bubbles Jr. hiding, like, in the...
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
that's
so
upper part of it too. So yeah, like, I don't know how much people know about this, but yeah, they killed Bubbles. They had Swamp Face, like, straight up just slam him to the ground and just toss him aside. He's just still, like, convulsing on the floor, flopping around. And then after that, like, you go down to where Bubbles initially was, and Bubbles Jr. is just sitting in his little tunnel waiting for his dad to come back.
That's his origin story.
Yeah.
He's gonna become Batman.
Yeah, he's probably gonna become a raid boss, and that's gonna be so fucking sick.
Yeah.
Or he'll just become another dungeon boss. But it would be so sick if they just made him a raid boss in the future that has, like, similar mechanics, and he's just an actual villain.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm really glad that... So, like, it was just weird that there was this mob that was... It kind of reminded me of, like, a prideful spawn or whatever, where it's just, like, way harder than the rest of the dungeon. And, you know, randomly, like, you could do it, I guess. Especially depending on the key level, you could do it, but... yeah, I guess besides nerfing it, this is definitely the next best thing they could do.
Well, so, I mean, they've been struggling with this for a while now. I don't understand what it is with Blizzard and mini-bosses and mini-boss, but mini-bosses have been something you try to skip almost all the time. There are only, like, a couple of scenarios where they're actually worth doing. And it's like Priory of the Sacred Flame, when they give 50 count and they're not oppressively hard. But more often than not, Blizzard just designs these mini-bosses that are insanely hard, where you can't pull with other mobs, and they give complete dogshit counts. Like in the Theater of Pain. Theater of Pain, you play the first mini boss, and then you try to skip the 2 mini bosses. Otherwise, you're losing a shit ton of time in that key. So I mean, I feel like that's something they really need to address. Also, just like the PTR dungeons in general, I don't know if you guys have touched them at all. I assume not, but goddamn, they're not in that good of a state. Blizzard has like somehow made Priory of the Sacred Flame worse, and just like them doubling down on mobs having to spam cast abilities is so bad for how M+ plays right now. Just like I don't understand how they're wanting people to pug these keys. It's like when we're playing PTR keys, we're not really tryhard, like we're not out here calling every kick and stop, and it is fucking miserable. I'm straight up in Arakara and Priory trying to just test my character, and it's unplayable how these mobs are just spam casting, just fucking dying left and right.
Yeah, I mean they are making like some good changes to some of them, right? Like, but I guess it's just not enough.
Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, like Floodgate definitely had the best changes. Them moving bubbles, and they actually moved one of the Blood Warper packs too, so like you don't actually have to do those. But aside from that, like the rest of the dungeons have straight up just been a downgrade. Arakara is fucking worse than before. Priory is just as bad, if not worse.
Prior's okay, yeah. I haven't played. I haven't been played, but Prior is one where I thought that would be hard to make that one worse. Because
I thought they would improve it for sure. Like I thought they would be like, oh, you know, like these mobs are bolting people down too much. So, like let's try to cut down on this, but it just hasn't happened.
Can I make a prediction?
Yes.
That going into the season, we're going to be apprehensive about the new dungeon set, and then it's going to come out and it's going to be slightly better than expected, but need some changes. Then they're going to make some changes, and then it'll be okay or good.
That's
I feel like that happens just like every year.
Yeah.
It just sucks really bad, but it's like, all right, you know, we gotta let the players suffer like for the first month, and then like, oh well, I guess this turned out to be a problem. Like, who would fucking guess? Why exactly are they on purpose?
They're not.
They're not. That's the thing.
Yeah, I know. I think M+ has been like I think Priory was the only dungeon that I felt negatively about this season overall. So
I mean, I don't personally dislike Priory. Like, I do think it's a cool dungeon, and it can be fun to play. But the problem is, like, unless I'm just giga tryharding, it's a pretty awful experience. So I guess it depends on like how I'm playing the dungeon. If I'm just like trying to pug and have fun, or if I'm just like fucking around on my class, it's awful. But if I'm like actually tryharding, then it can be enjoyable.
Yeah, Priory is like it's the one dungeon where I am kind of unexcited to zone into that place.
Yeah, I mean, rightfully so.
Yeah.
Dude, I'm just so disconnected from Mythic. Like, yeah. Dude, like it's crazy. I mean, I obviously used to do it a ton. Did MDIs, did all of the stuff back to challenge modes. And last season I did was like Dragonflight season 2 or 3 on Demon Hunter, which was really, really fun. And since then, that's just like the one part of my WoW experience that just doesn't exist. So I struggle to have any. Not gonna give a lot of takes on it.
Very, very, yeah. Okay, something that's not WoW related at all that we can all give some uninformed takes on if we want. Have you guys seen the Stop Killing Games initiative and the drama that's got up around it, and then the fact that it hit the like 1 million signatures mark over in the European, I don't know, whatever, they have some democracy or something over there. Weird.
I have one question about that. Like, obviously Pirate Software is like a huge loser. It's just the what reasonable take could there be to vehemently oppose a position of like, hey, you should the whole bit of Stop Killing Games is to not when games that are like made online, for example, and then they die and the company stops supporting the servers, you can no longer play those games anymore until people paid for them. That's the bit. They are proposing legislation, I think specifically in EU, to where games have to create a contingency to have some kind of playable offline version of a game, or they don't do that. One of the two. Which I kind of a valiant like that's all positives, right? Like who is like fuck that? Apparently, Pirate Software is saying fuck that. I cannot possibly imagine why. Even to the point where I know someone recently was like, would you be willing to sit down and have a conversation with him about like why you disagree with some of these things? And he's like, no, it's not worth it. Nothing will come. Like what do you guys know more about it? Like why specifically does he dislike that movie?
I think there's an argument that you could make that's like, hey, this is gonna like kill. So I guess there's the publisher's side of it, which is like, we want to be able to, kill games, not for the purpose of killing them, but like because
it's too expensive. If we had to
like
create a contingency, it would make us not make the game at all.
Right. And
9
we want to be able
spell
to,
power for
turn off. Like we want to be able to make a game without then being obligated to support it forever. The thing is, it's not like the initiative is the basic idea is like you shouldn't be able to buy a game and then have it stop existing, which you currently can. So you could not believe the people making the initiative where they say like, hey, we've written it such that you can design an online game, and then you don't, like, it's not like you have to keep the servers up forever, right? But you just have to release the software so that other people can run their own servers, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess that, or if you're a greedy publisher, which Pirate Software obviously does some software publishing, so that might be it. I kind of feel like, I don't know, I feel like he's just sort of reflexively reacting to people backlashing him by doubling down. I think that's the main thing going on there, but I can't say I know for sure.
What was Pirate Software even claiming? I haven't really kept up.
Like that this is he's rooting against this this initiative basically.
And then kind of I think the big story is kind of ironically this movement was completely dead in the water.
Yeah.
Like it needed 1 million signatures.
Yeah, and he
By the way,
revived
that's
it.
an insane number.
Yeah.
But like they needed an insane number of signatures for I guess someone to consider this. And they were stuck at like less than half of what they needed. They needed like more than 500,000 more signatures within a few days or something, which was it was dead. And the reason this all came up is the guy pronounced it dead. He like made some statement like this is gonna die. And then a big part of this too is people's just general dislike of
Thank you for the
software.
follow.
Like he had like the classic thing where he just basically it all boiled down to the fact that he just couldn't take accountability for something and then kept doubling down on it. That was basically all that happened. But then people just decided to hate that guy. I hate him for a different reason. He called Fired Up a dipshit for the spell slinger thing. So unfortunately, I'm forced to hate him for the rest of my life. But because Pirate opposed this thing, people saw that it was actually going to die, and then somehow found a way to get 500,000 more signatures to keep it alive because of their dislike of this guy, which is kind of legendary.
Yeah, that is it definitely was one of those like Streisand effect things, right, where him talking about it is what made it become such a big thing.
Yeah,
part of what made it get so much, I guess.
What gave it traction,
Yeah. I don't know. I guess I haven't like read the full text of the proposal or anything like that, so I do think it would be bad if it were true that like people were obligated to. But I don't think that. Like again, I believe that it's not going to do any super bad stuff. I think it's mostly just going to be that publishers can't like. Publishers sometimes, I guess, are going to make the decision that, like, hey, releasing any of our proprietary, like, here's how to do a WildStar private server, right? Something like that. Like, when you take down the WildStar servers, if you then have to say, like, okay, here's how you could run a WildStar private server, maybe publishers are thinking, okay, we're going to lose some IP value or that kind of thing if we have to do that. And, like, I'm sort of sympathetic to that, but I'm not as sympathetic to, like, hey, people buy games, they spend a lot of money on games. If at some point after they make that decision, it stops being supported, I think they should be able to recoup some of that by being able to keep, get access to like all of the bones of the game to try and play with it more.
Well,
so
I also feel like it depends on who this is affecting, right? Like, so what made this pop off was Ubisoft, or was it?
It's not
one of
really-
those companies had a game that they
It's
just
not
stopped
really
supporting. It was
amazing.
a major game
Crew,
company.
right?
It was
What
an
it was?
extremely.
It has a lot of
What'd you say it was?
stamina.
Crew,
Like
the game Crew.
Yeah,
basically,
but
if you're
It was
playing
some kind of racing
hardcore,
game that
this
had,
is
like,
definitely the
super
drop
turbo
for you.
died or something, but a decent amount of people still played it. And they just couldn't
I'm
log
not
into the
having
game
problems
that they
with
bought it for because they
survivability,
shut down
though.
all support for it. I need to get the name of the company right.
And the two
was
sets
some
not
Ubisoft,
good at
yeah.
all.
It was
That's-
Ubisoft.
Yeah.
So
But yeah, Ubisoft. Okay, so like if you're Ubisoft, this is where I maybe will contradict myself. I feel like you should definitely have to have people have access to games that they paid for, but I don't know if I would hold an indie game to
Right.
that same level of scrutiny. Personally. So maybe it's a little more complicated than that.
I think that is a fair take on it. Is like there could be different like levels of, you know, like basically if your company's making $50 million or more or something in annual profits or revenue or whatever it is, then more stringent stuff gets applied to you under this.
Dude, imagine if Blizzard did this.
Yeah. I mean, if they ever shut down WoW, I'd like to have them have to put up the, you know, the source code or whatever.
No, I mean, like, imagine how mad people would be.
Oh yeah.
Like, dude, it'd be like rioting in the streets because people already hate them so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, apparently this has to do with, well, apparently Pirate Software's against this because apparently it's gonna like kill all live service games.
Yeah. See, I don't
Some way.
think.
Well,
I don't-
eventually.
I don't actually know the whole argument, but that seems to be his.
I mean, that would be a pretty strong argument if it was true. I just don't know if that guy knows what he's talking about, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's, you know, given the this is one of these things where it's like I haven't read the text of the legislation proposed or whatever, and so I can't claim to really be an expert there. But I am an expert a little bit on the World of Warcraft stuff that I do know that he's talked about
Well,
somewhat.
Pirate Software worked at Blizzard, so you know I believe everything he has to say.
I actually hadn't heard. Is that true?
Is that, yeah, are you sure?
Yeah,
Are you
yeah.
sure about
His
that?
dad
Is
worked
there-
at Blizzard too, or some shit.
Okay.
Is that any? Is there any?
Do you have a source?
Yeah, anywhere we could
I
hear
don't know
that
if I've
quite
ever heard that
verified?
before.
Yeah.
Okay. Other topics that we've written down for our podcast here. I think we've kind of gotten through everything that we planned to talk about. I guess Frank added, so you guys can decide whether this was a good or bad addition to the topic list. He added predictions for new raid? ? Full count, perhaps? ?
Ooh. I mean, he said raid testing too. There's not too much to go. I did like a YouTube video where I went over it, so I won't do all of that. I will just say the second to last boss is kind of cool, as like a last phase that has orbs that are rotating the track that are sucking you in Kaiveza style, while also having shit to dodge, so they can't touch each other and they also never go away in reverse direction. It's definitely going to be at least a visual spectacle. And they made like a Tetris boss. Like another boss is just like completely unlike anything else.
Is that Fractal?
Yeah,
Fractalus?
Fractalus. Yeah, there's like 6 lanes, and 2 times every set he puts out walls, and you have to choose where they go. And if any of the walls get to 6, you die. And then you can put them there and clear them in order, and then depending on which ones you clear, there's different mechanics. It's pretty cool.
That's pretty cool.
It is cool, and you know, I think people will like it. It's a really short enrage single target boss, which I think is cool. The last one that they've really done kind of like that is Butcher. Butcher was a 4-minute enrage.
Wow.
And that I don't think since then there has been a single target boss that's been that short. Other Butcher equivalents, there's like another like optional boss which people considered an optional this raid, so some Butcher callbacks, but it is going to be a fight where, like, no question, every time you get a mechanic, there's going to be a marker on the ground and a weak aura tells you where to go. Like, there will be zero YOLOing or the fight would be terrible, but also in a way, you know, we talk about there are weak aura bosses, like there are bosses where, what I mean by that is like a boss where the weak aura is really frustrating and it defines the way you're progressing the fight. There's going to be nothing, it's so interesting. On Fractalus, every time you move, it's going to be dictated by a weak aura, basically. but I don't think that's going to be a frustrating mechanic because you don't have a very long amount of time to deal with it, and the difficulty of the fight is going to be purely throughput based. But that is an interesting element to it, where it's a fight where you're going to get a lot more go to X marker things on your screen, but I don't think it's going to be frustrating.
What are the general vibes of this raid?
What do you mean by that?
Like positive, it's gonna be fun, it's gonna be cool.
We haven't tested
There's gonna
Mythic.
be some shitty fights.
We do that on Thursday and Friday, but just looking at it, it seems. I mean, there's a couple of really cool looking fights. You know what actually might be a theme? I think this might be a raid more than normal, where I have a much higher opinion on it than other people. Do you guys remember Lihavum the boss, where like you had to kill those constructs, and like I'm like raving about how cool this boss is because of how fun it was to like figure all this shit out. But like when anyone else gets to the boss, you just fucking like plug and play, kill exactly what we killed, boss is over real quick, zero thought about it, move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
Fractalus, I feel like it's gonna be really, really fun figuring out the correct way to do that fight. And then when you get to that boss, you're going to know where to stand and where to go, and that's going to be less interesting. I feel like if you look at the last phase of Nexus Prince, or Nexus King, you are going to look at that on stream and be like, what the fuck is going on? How are they possibly going to figure this out? And then we're going to figure it out, and we're going to have so much fun figuring it out. And then you're going to get to the boss, and you're going to have markers down for where to put every single orb and where to shoot your Star Killer swings. And that level won't be there for that, right? So and there's more bosses like that in this raid than others. But that doesn't necessarily mean they are going to be bad. There are bosses where they're very plug and play from a video, and it's less, and they're still really fun and like really intense. So like, that's just something that I think if you're talking about a vibe or a theme that's different, I think there's a lot more of that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, personally, just looking at the raid, this raid looks fucking sick.
Yeah.
I think this might be the raid I might vibe the most with for a pretty long time now, because like Gallywix, I know, I mean, like last year, I know you guys were like pretty hyped about how it looked, but I was like, you know, I'm not really that into goblins or like the whole casino theme, and all of Dragonflight was a complete bullshit raid where it's like, all right, well, we're fighting some stupid little dragon, and I didn't really like how it felt from Dragonflight all the way until now. So this might be like the first raid I'm actually
Do you mean like
hyped
aesthetic
about.
vibe?
Both, right? Like, 'cause you know how we talked about like wanting an epic boss fight and like wanting something similar to fucking Gul'dan, or even like even Sepulchre was like pretty fucking cool. We just haven't had one of those in a very long time.
Yeah,
At least
I see what you mean.
to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I definitely have a high
Yeah.
opinion of the bosses. But you could have a really high opinion of the bosses going into testing, going into the raid, and they could all be bad, and the vice versa could happen. It's really hard to tell.
That is true.
You could make a boss like Nexus Princess that's perfect on paper, and it's great. And it's great in testing, and it's really fun to think about. And then you get to the boss, and you're ready to kill it, and it should have died. And then it turns out we had to pull it 100 more times with one tank, and that made the boss absolutely miserable, you know? And then that's a world first issue, but that exact same kind of thing can happen for you guys. We killed Skarn. It's a fucking great fight. And then they just did the weirdest shit ever, and it became a terrible experience for everyone, you know? There's so many little things like that can happen. They can get a boss's health right or wrong in 2% in either direction, and the boss is a total pushover. It's impossible and frustrating. Both of those are frustrating for different reasons. You know what I mean? I remember how much people shit on Guardian after Sludge Fist was the previous tier, and it was just basically because it was too easy, you know? Like, but then they could have made Guardian too hard, and people would have hated it. Like, just pure number tuning matters so much, and there's no way to know what that looks like until you get close to know how good it's going to be.
I do think though that there's a ceiling for how cool a raid can be that can be lowered by like the theme being off, you know? Like, and I think the ceiling is at 100% in this raid.
Yeah, it looks
in a
fucking
way
cool.
that, you know, maybe like I guess Nerebar Palace is maybe an example where it's like that raid. I mean, I actually quite like the theme of it, but it has nothing on like this one in my opinion.
Yeah.
Yo, speaking of tuning, I don't know if you guys have killed it with PTR tuning, but PTR tuning is some dog shit right now.
Yeah, that's always always.
I mean, they had a lot on
always
their
true.
plate. Like, I guess it was kind of expected because they're making some massive changes to a lot of specs. But my god, the tuner right now is awful.
In like the stuff's too hard way, or is it like
No.
ways?
Like
Classes
some
are
classes
doing
are
better.
just
classes
yeah.
like,
Some
are
classes are like
unbalanced
straight
relative
up
to each other?
doing
It's not
an
too much
absurd amount of
different
damage.
than normal, but
I've heard
there-
Moonkin is like existing by the grace of a bug, which is pretty funny.
I don't.
Yeah, but I
Yeah,
mean,
that's the thing too. Like I don't know
that
how many of
happens
these are
every
like
patch.
bugs, and it just feels like we're so close to the patch. But to be fair, it's been feeling this way for a while now.
I think I would just who wants to put money on all that stuff's gonna be figured out by when the raid comes out. I feel like I would put my money on that. This is pretty consistently is the case where tuning and class stuff, especially since they've been doing the reworks. Right, like since they've been things like Dragonflights, like since Talent Trees came out, and then subsequently every patch they had to massively change multiple trees every patch. There's always a bunch of stuff that is initially broken on PTR that always just gets figured out. I'm not.
I would say more often than not, it gets fixed like maybe a week or two into the patch.
Like things like Moonkin doing all of their damage from a Star Surge bug. I don't think stuff like that.
Okay, well, not to that
That's not gonna make
extent.
it to live,
Yeah,
but
like
yeah.
not to that extent, but there's still been many scenarios where some classes or just like something gets extremely broken and it requires them a bit for it to actually get fixed.
Yeah, I mean, there's things that have been bugged for. I mean, Windwalkers had like 10 bugs with how like clones and stuff worked for like millions of years. So there's some stuff
Yeah.
like that all the time. But I feel like as far as like overall raid balance is concerned, it's just like it's pretty frequently exactly the same thing. Like every single patch, with a few classes are really good, some stink, and almost everything is like really good for raid.
Dude, my favorite is when an old bug gets like fixed and then gets reintroduced somehow mysteriously, like it comes back from some change they make. But you brought up the talent reworks being something that has changed the way that PTR testing's happened, which is actually the topic of our Patreon question. So we could go to that right now, which is from I Blow Up Raids.
I don't really have any comments on the whole pirate software and the killing games kind of thing. I haven't really made my own opinion yet on that stuff, and it's not. It doesn't even affect NA, so it affects the EU. So I think that's why a lot of people there's like a lot of it might establish like precedent within the tech industry, but I don't really think it does anything else necessarily. And is it important? I think policy is important, but I don't really have an opinion on it because I don't know, because I think we're playing with kind of a new kind of like when AI came out, okay, and then the government was like, oh well, we should probably kind of put some regulations on this just a little bit before things get too crazy. I think it's something like that, and I think it has something to do with when these games get implemented, that these servers still have to go up, and so they have to be powered and they have to be sold to someone, and someone has to keep those servers up. I don't know, or at least like the game's out there for free for you to download to play on your personal whatever. I think that's helpful, but I don't really know all the externalities and all the different pathings this could take. So, and I think I think we only see this policy possibly as something very narrow, and of course the companies, anybody that feels like this is going to be taking revenue away there or be an expenditure from a company, a corporate point of view, of course the corporate scene is going to be against it. So I think that's why they're kind of getting blowback from the corporations part of it. And I can totally see why the gamers that love the game, but it's also a thing where how many people have to be playing a game before you have to keep a server up full time for it. You know what I mean? So, because we'll be, at the end of the day, we're expending resources, our hard-earned resources, to fund these things, So is this, to make this a perpetuity, a perpetual thing, to push this forever, it's a hard argument. Because anything in perpetuity, you don't know the future that far in advance. You just don't. So before you have an opinion on it and give that opinion and be harsh, understand that you're talking about something in perpetuity that is supposed to go forever. So, and there's no guarantee that it will go forever. So, I leave you with that, and we'll continue with the rest of the podcast.
Most talent reworks have been widely praised for making it easier to get everything. 2-point talents becoming 1 points, etc. Talent trees that haven't gotten reworked in a while feel comparatively clunky. Was it a mistake that every talent rework makes bad trees feel nice, instead of making some of the good trees worse so they align with the bad ones?
What a question.
I like
Keep
this.
going. Keep going. Keep going.
Okay. Is it too easy to get everything you want to the reworked trees?
Yep.
It feels good, but I'm not sure if it's actually good design or good for the game.
That is so fucking... Dude, this guy's based. I blow up raids.
I mean, so there's two angles to this. Number one, if you're Blizzard and you're constantly never caught up on what you need to be doing, you have a priority list of what needs to be done because you're never finished with your work. Certainly, these people really hate their class shields, make it better. Certainly is higher up on the priority list than, hey, these guys' tree's a little too good, let's make it shit. Right? Not to mention the community's reaction to information like that. Even if it was the best thing to do for the game, you reacting to people being mad and making them happy is kind of, if you think about it, that's kind of what their job is, like, all the time. That's why that happens. But I do think you are onto something where, like, I still feel like talent trees have been out for a while now, and there's still so many interesting, like, when I look at a talent tree, I, like, love looking at a bunch of different options, and, like, oh man, if you really want to do AoE, like, these two things are so impactful and they're so cool, and this is for cleave, and, like, you have so many options. But then that sits at a direct opposition to what you actually want as a player, which is you want your cleave build to also be your single target build, and you want to change almost no talents. So, like, you want variety, but if you are the person that actually has a lot of variety, your class sucks.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because you want to just spec all the AoE stuff, and it just happens to be your single target rotation too, and then you just...
But that's why this game's hard. Okay? And it's hard on multiple levels. WoW is hard because there are some classes that you bring that can be the AoE. They're just going to do uncapped AoE for anything, basically. And this is where raid leading, like, the variance of, like, these class changes, like, yes, you do, what Max is speaking is true. You want to have the least amount of difference between your cleave spec, your minimal cleave spec, and your single target, because especially when you have a fight that it's mostly single target, say 75% is going to be single target, and you're only going to have 25% of the fight going to be cleave related. Like, how much can you get away with as a raid leader? Okay, and you don't need somebody in full Mythic Plus spec to deal with a lot of these issues. Now, sometimes it's just the best option. It's just the things it brings plus the utility. Maybe you'll just have a full M plus build into, but you have to have internal metrics basically, and you have to meet those numbers. And at the end of the day, are the kind of like Rick Reverb is a real good one. Did the pylons die fast enough to where we could actually like kill the boss, basically? Because the ads have to die. If the ads didn't die, there's a problem. There's not enough cleave or AoE. And so that's when you start getting people up spec having to raid lead and be like, hey, I know you're top DPS and stuff like this, but I need you to accomplish this goal. This is your goal, to do whatever spec you need to do. I need you to figure this out to where these pylons die in this amount of time. If they don't, it's on you. And if you're telling me that that is everything you have and you can't go more AoE or you can't figure it out, then we'll have to replace you at that point. As a raid leader, we have to make those decisions, and that is the process of which you make those decisions. So
you're great at everything, right? You're the prototypical Mythic Plus class. You're the class that's
so
great at every raid
stupid
fight.
though.
It is. He's right. That's what he's saying. Like, the classes that have access to all this stuff, like they all kind of operate the same way, and there is less choice. It has gone against what talent trees want, but also like, the only way to do that is to shitify the good ones to where you actually have to make
Okay, but
choices.
I don't even
now.
want to call it shitify. Like I feel like a better word for it is just to add friction. I guess maybe friction's a bit of a buzzword everyone uses nowadays, but like that really is what needs to happen with these trees. I mean, I've been complaining about this for a long time now. I've been saying how the Dragonflight tree has caused this whole quote-unquote making retail too far gone. Because I mean, really, like all the problems that stem from all the problems that we've been complaining about stem from the Dragonflight talent tree and all the reworks they've done. Like mages, of them getting their tree reworked back in like season 2 or whatever it was, and them getting ice cold, and them getting mass barrier, and them having access to multiple CCs, and I don't know, it's just like, it's ridiculous that for a tree to be good, you can basically pick up everything. You get all your good talent points, you get all your good defensive stuff, you get all your utility. And like, yeah, I understand that people don't want to choose between having to do AoE or single target or having.
They only don't want to do that when other classes don't.
Right.
Like, that was their
Right.
mistake. They when they saw this happen at the beginning, they were like, wait, these classes are sick. Wait, if you're an arms warrior, you can't do anything without changing your whole tree. They should have, in my opinion, and I agree with you, I think this is what you're saying, they should have gone through, we should make classes feel more like arms warrior and not make everything feel like a Havoc DH where you're just playing the same build all the time, because like that is what makes you good. But if you're following the complaining, the people who are complaining are the ones with those trees. The people who could do that aren't complaining, so it totally makes sense they went the direction they did. But you are right that it is turned talent trees into like a frictionless or you're just mad if you don't get everything. So now talent trees are kind of inherently boring.
Yeah, it is like the more interesting your talent tree is, the more kind of annoying it is to actually play that spec. And
well, it's annoying because you actually have to turn on your brain. It's annoying because you have to go through your talent tree and read every talent that you have. When I do coaching, the first thing I ask the new player is, when is the last time you went and individually read your entire talent tree? And they're like, well, I haven't. Like, and now you're wondering why you're not doing superior DPS, like why you're not topping the charts, or why you're not pulling 90% of your theoretical. You know, like this stuff, like by just reading the talent tree and acknowledging that what talents are good in what scenario and situation, that is World of Warcraft. Okay? Because if the whole reason, now obviously this doesn't necessarily work with hardcore classic, but when we're just raiding and deaths don't matter necessarily. When we're raiding and we're trying new things out, and if you're a tank and you're not surviving, and say it's for sake of this argument, it's not a healer's fault, but and they don't necessarily can give you say externals are not a thing, then you're going to ask that tank to look at your talent tree. Can you talent something that is able to get you through this part without taking so much damage? Or do you have what is it? Like a revive or a faint death? Do you have like a cheat death effect? That's what we're going for. A cheat death effect to be able to continually to do this, to get us through this next stage, and then we'll mark that down and be like, okay, and then try that. Did it work? Did it not work? If it didn't work, then then you start talking about it, depending on how many pulls you're in. Do I need a different class of tank? Number one, and then we start going down the rabbit hole in the process of why do we need to replace this person? It's not necessarily the player, it might be the class. Okay, so but also, do we want our WoW to be dependent like that? Because the conversation we've had earlier is we want to get rid of all these raid tree the raid buffs, but then it would be entirely on the tree. But here's the argument on this side. On this side is, if everything is based on the tree, the talent tree, is that effectively more boring than to split it up and have the raid buff over here? So, and each of us has to explain that, but that is the argument they're laying out, whether they know it or not. And they're doing it in two different sections, so it's kind of confusing. But when you put it together, it kind of makes more sense of what they're actually talking about. So,
the more that it's right to tinker with your build, and the less true that there's a cookie cutter build you can always use, the more like that spec kind of sucks to be one of the people playing, because you just have to, like, that experience of, oh man, I don't have this talent that I'm supposed to have for this dungeon or whatever.
Yeah, but does it suck if you're at the top of the freaking DPS chart? Like, if you're at the top of the meter, who cares? Like, this is the majority of people that raid. And it's also why people get butthurt about having to spec into something different to actually provide a role to the raid. Like, like the Rick Reverb example, if these ads don't die, the raid wipes. So you either respec or we find someone else. And the problem is, when you're not a top tier guild, is to find someone else is harder and more challenging. So people, what they do is they're like, okay, you can just play the spec you want, even though you're wiping the raid on purpose now. We have come to the conclusion that if these ads don't die, we wipe, you're wasting all of our time. If that person is unwilling to do that and change, then we're just dragging them along, because we're just going to waste time, waste pulls, things like this. But because the pool of raiders is so small, and it's not like we need someone next week. We need somebody right now to replace this person. And if it's a meta class, even worse, right? Even worse, because it's a meta class, so, and it might be easier to find, but that means that if you replace it with a non-meta class, then you're losing on two fronts now. And then what you do is just hope that the class you brought in is actually better at that job of killing the ads more than the meta class is, which typically 9 times out of 10 is not going to be the result, but so
like, that is something that you just don't have to deal with if you always play the same build. So it is a very interesting.
No, it's mind numbing. People need to use their brain, and they need to do their homework. That's all they have to do in this game. Use your brain, and you do your homework. If you do your homework, and this is the classic thing, I came to raid, but I haven't looked at the raid bosses, I haven't looked at all this stuff. And I come in there, and we're the first 5 wipes, I get it. But now I'm ready. And you might be high on that learning curve, but how much higher would you be on the learning curve if you did your homework, kind of thing? Like, it's not a secret.
Dichotomy there, and I don't know if there's an answer to it. I kind of feel like the answer to it is just choice nodes. Like, choice nodes give you both things where...
Okay, and at that point, we might as well
points.
just play the MoP tree again, right?
Yes,
like, well,
that's the problem. And that kind of that's been my thesis for this for a while, is like, the new talent system is not actually better than the MoP talent system was. It's
For
just
endgame.
it's better because they are supporting it. Whereas with MoP talent trees, they just left like 6% damage loss versus 20% damage gain versus 3% damage gain. Like that was a row on the Warlock talent tree for its entire existence. And like, if they had just done this level of support for the MoP talent tree system, I think it would be just better. I don't know.
Well, for us, like the reason, I think one of the main reasons they did the talent tree was for leveling. Like
Yeah,
when you
it
leveled
is
the
nicer
MoP
for
talent tree,
leveling.
you got something every 15 levels,
True.
versus now you gain something every level, and that for learning your class and that every point you get when leveling, that really matters to people. That was the primary reason for all.
It's also like more iconically WoW, I guess. So there's definitely upsides to it, but like, yeah, for us, I think it is fair to say like it's kind of weird to like reverse engineer yourself back to the MoP talent trees, but that's what happens every time I try and think this question through.
Yeah.
People
Also,
hated this.
Yeah.
speaking of like frictionless, it feels like every class just does damage the same now too. I mean, like, not obviously not every single class is the same, but so many classes just do prowl damage or do funnel or whatever. It's something I've noticed more and more of. Like whenever I'm doing PTR keys with different specs, somehow just every spec in the game just blows up. Okay, again, not every spec, but I'm just saying this hyperbolically. But so many specs just blow up that one mob. Like we'd be doing a floodgate, for example, and there'd be that one big mob in the pack. It would just get completely destroyed, and every other mob is still alive, because like that's just how a lot of specs do damage nowadays. So yeah, like that's another.
No, that's how specs do damage when they're on the curve before they scale them down and fit one model to then go to the raid boss that they set. So they're doing this testing for a couple reasons. Okay, they're doing this reason because they want to see the thing like the raid bosses go, but they're also gauging a certain amount of health that they can take the data down to where on this curve, this damage curve, okay, of these raids, where on this curve can we put this boss's HP? So basically they're saying, okay, I want this fight to last 5.5 minutes. I want this fight to last 6 minutes. I want this to last 8 minutes. Now, obviously, there's intermission time in there, but there's a point on that data curve, okay, on that distribution, that's going to mark exactly where that boss should die, given the averages and the scalars that are going to come out of that. And what they do is, I want the boss to die here, so we're going to make the stat weights of all the classes X, Y, and Z. Okay, whatever it needs to do. So what they're doing is the way they fit this, you fit the boss's health to the DPS output. You already have the models for the DPS output for the most part. Okay, like. You just do for the most. You know what these models are going to do, and then what you do is, if it's too much or too little, after you've set the raid boss up, then you start tweaking like the talent tree, stuff like that. But that's what happens when you see the Wraith of the World first go, and you see a 15% health nerf or 10% health nerf to Muggsy right before they get to it, because they're on Bandit. And what they did was they hadn't set the HP for the boss yet. Or they had, but they're making these adjustments, because when you start to get to the build of the RNG part of the stat weights of what this gear is supposed to do theoretically, but they're not doing theoretical damage. They're doing less than that, because you can never do more than that. It's impossible. So once they get to that point, then you fix everything together, and then you balance it, And then some situations you get into Gallywix territory, and then you don't really know kind of what's happening at that point, because the boss just falls over. And that's twofold, and I've talked about that before. Is one, They either want the race to world first only to last a maximum of 2 weeks because of overhead and everything, in kind of it's a gentleman's agreement between the top tier guilds and the top tier guilds that are getting sponsored, because these sponsors wouldn't sponsor them if it went a 3rd week or a 4th week. Okay, but as a WoW player, 4 weeks going race world first is not a big deal, to me. So, you're on the big grind. But if that is really the concern here, did they nerf it too much to appease the 2 week slot there? This is the question. And is that, as a WoW community, do we want that? Like, was the extra shard to spark? Was the extra spark dropped to meet the 2 week requirement here? And if we're going to say race the world first is who can get the furthest in 2 week period or 14-day period, if we're going to declare the winner that's fine. If we're going to declare it to clear the entire raid as fast as possible, that's fine. However, let's be consistent. Let's say what this is. That's all I have to say about that, really, is just be honest with the community, because the community will tell you what they want. They will.
Very interesting question. It's one of the ones where, again, I think the main thing is I'm glad that they do these reworks and they are redoing the talent trees often. And, given that there are a lot of specs that have nice frictionless talent trees, I think everybody should have them. But yeah, maybe it would be better if the default was a little bit more friction. But I don't know. Maybe people would be, on average, less happy with the game if that was true. So,
but they're less happy with the game because they actually read their talent tree, and they have to make informed decisions based on that information. And what they really want is they want if they wanted to play a different game, like, this is the weird thing, is they want to play a game that is like very, very information heavy. Okay. But they don't want to. It's kind of like if you want to be a high like a high earning, like any industry. Say you want to be a lawyer, but you don't want to go to school to be a lawyer, kind of thing. It's kind of like that. Like, I want to be a high level raider, but I don't want to do the work to be a high level raider. I don't want to so at that point, whose fault is it? You know what I mean? So nothing's holding them back from doing that, So
either way, cool question. Thanks for sending it in. Do either of you guys have anything else you wanted to talk about on this week's PoddyC?
When do you guys think the raid's coming out? Or the season, or the patch, or any of that stuff?
August is the
August 12th.
August 12th for the
August
patch?
12th is what you think? For the raid or the patch, yeah.
Oh, I guess we would have like a week of pretty much.
Yeah, 'cause
nothing,
we know there's a
right?
heroic week with, or a champion track week, as it were, now.
Yeah, I guess August 12th for patch
Okay.
would probably
Alright.
make the most sense.
So a month and a half.
Yeah.
But it feels so early, so that's.
It
why I
could
don't
be.
know.
They
I mean,
could
that's not
wait
what
for
I'm
Labor Day
expecting.
weekend
Mhm.
or week. They could do that. They've done that before.
Okay. That's gonna be
Hey,
it.
what about you
That's-
guys?
But Labor Day
You
Tuesday,
guys
that
think?
Tuesday
I
after
don't know,
Labor Day.
I think August
maybe?
12th,
Yeah, early
August
August.
19th, August 5th. I feel like it's going to be one of those. I think the Turbulent Time Waves had the
But-
patch
But we'll
as
see.
August 5th, and that would mean the raid.
Oh,
That'd be my
what the
guess.
fuck? Wait, that's mega early then.
That would be
Yeah.
my guess, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it means the PTR cycle is going to be fairly short, I guess, by relative to some, but I think that a lot of them have been on this fairly short cadence recently, so I think it's definitely likely.
I'm just not used to it being that early because I like usually we PTR test for a while and I'm still in PTR dungeons for like another month. But it does seem like if it's coming out next month, that's pretty early.
Okay.
Yep. Got to push the
That's
next
That's
expansion.
the end of the PoddyC. Shout out to the
Oh.
people in the comment section. Love you guys. Yeah.
W pod.
I actually didn't read the comments the last time, but I'm sure you guys are behaving, so I'm sure that now,
Gotta be happy.
yeah, you guys are having a good time. No controversial statements. Everybody loves our takes on all things. That's what I believe. And see you next week. Bye, everybody.
That's fun. So, if you haven't subbed PoddyC, definitely do that. They're good guys. So anyway, that's my commentary on PoddyC, episode 76. So we'll be doing this every week. It's fun. It's enjoyable. I like listening to their ideas and where they kind of bring stuff up and kind of commenting on my viewpoint. Being an older player, being somebody that played in the original days of this game, it's really fun to kind of come back and kind of see where they're going with this stuff. So maybe take an old school vibe, but also, you know, I'm not saying that my opinion relates to everyone's opinion, but I think I do bring some light of why people feel the way they feel sometimes when this happens, just because of what the changes actually mean and what the externality of the change is, you know, because necessarily Blizzard doesn't necessarily, they're not necessarily thinking of how the player is going to feel with this, you know, for one reason or another. So anyway, if you like the video, if you like these commentaries, definitely give a thumbs up. You know, definitely subscribe to the channel. So you can find me on Twitch and YouTube, and definitely sub. Helps channel grow. So thanks. See you next time.